Today I'm going to teach you about how to play some tricky rhythm patterns, and the first one we're going to start with today is the 16th note triplet. You can make any triplet easy by understanding one concept, that a triplet is 3 evenly spaced notes in the place of another note. In this case, we have a 16th note triplet taking up the value of an 8th note. So what I want to do here is I want to do a little exercise. I want to count out a measure of 4/4 in 8th notes. It's going to sound something like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, if you take a look at the example that we have beat 1 here, and in the time that it takes to play it, say and, we're going to hit 3 evenly spaced notes, and it's going to sound something a little bit like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And guess what? You just played a 16th note triplet. And I always like to internalize all of these rhythms, and basically all that means is you're coming up with some sort of internal dialogue that's going to help you remember it. And this is how I remember 16th note triplets, especially when they are paired with 8th notes. It sounds a lot like Imperial March from Star Wars a little bit. Bump, ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-da-da, to show you what it's going to be in context. So here we go: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. The next 3 examples are going to be 16th note patterns with ties in the middle. I got a question about this, and I can see why some students struggle with this. To tackle this one, first off, we're going to write out the beats of our measure. So I've charted out the 16th notes: 1E and a, and then we're just going to continue 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Now, how you're going to do this is you're going to plan your point of attack. A lot of people, when they're playing rhythms and they have a note that's held over, especially if it's tied, they're thinking the wrong question. And the wrong question is, how long do I hold this note for? What you should be asking yourself instead is, what note am I attacking or moving on? Let me show you how this works. So we have this example here. We're obviously hitting on beat 1, right? And we're holding over that E. Our point of attack is and then obviously we're going to be hitting on as well. So when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking on emphatically playing that and, just so I know that I have the right note. So it's going to go 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Now, you don't have to play with an accent when you play, but when I'm thinking of attack points, which you're going to see more and more of in this lesson, you're thinking, where am I attacking? And I always like to, when I'm first playing the rhythm, really put that emphasis, make sure I got it. Let's take a look at a few more examples. We're going to breeze through this one really quick. It's literally the same thing, right? 1E and a, and then 2E and a, 3 and a, 4E and a. You know the deal by now. Now the question is, where is the attack point? Well, we're hitting on beat 1, right? And then we're hitting again on and we're holding over. We can see that with the tie. Therefore, our plan of attack, our attack point, is on a. 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. This one I almost don't even need to go over because it's the same thing. You're just planning a different point of attack. Obviously, it would be and a this time, but I do want to show you one tricky instance where this might still trip you up. So now we have 2 pairs of 16th notes, each joined together in the middle with this tie. And this is actually probably the most likely scenario you're going to see, because you really don't need ties on the other one, and I can explain that in a second. But let's talk about this one. Now, question: what is your point of attack? Well, we're hitting beat 1, another note on beat E, and then here's where we're holding over between and then the first part of beat 2, right? Our point of attack, thus, must be E, and then I know I'm hitting other notes on and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. So here's how you're going to count that one: 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a, 4E and a. Now, I mentioned a second ago about how you're not going to see a lot of ties in the middle of those 16th note patterns, and here's why. So if we had a tie here, this is literally the same as this. It's literally the same as the 8th 2/16 rhythm, which we've talked about in other lessons. Guess what time it is? It's time to answer the question that I've been getting in my comments about rhythm for the longest time, and it is,
Tim, how do you play polyrhythms?
specifically, we're going to be talking about the 3 versus 2 polyrhythm and the 4 versus 3, which we'll get to here in just a second. But let's do 3 versus 2 first. If the editor of your music is nice enough, they're going to have the triplet. It is, by the way, this is called triplets and duplets. So 3 versus 2. Now, if they're nice, they're going to show you how they line up properly on the sheet music, meaning you can see where they hit together, where you're hitting the right hand, left hand, right hand, but you still may be confused, or they might not have it written that nicely at all. So I'm going to show you exactly how to do it, and it's a lot easier than you think. So here we go. We're going to do an exercise, right? We're going to count out and clap a measure of triplets in 4/4. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Now we're going to add a layer of complexity. We were just playing 1 triplet before, but what I want you to add in now is just one more note. We're going to add in just this note. Don't worry about the other 8th note yet. And that 8th note happens between the second and third of the note of the triplet. So it's going to sound something like this. So instead of 1 triplet, it's going to go 1 triplet. I like to say let, kind of makes it a little bit easier to remember. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And guess what? You've almost played a whole measure of 3 versus 2 polyrhythms. We're only missing one little element, and that is obviously that these 2 first notes hit together. So we only need to add one more note in our left hand in this case to complete the polyrhythm. So they hit together, triplet. We're going to do a whole measure now. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. So guess what? You just played a polyrhythm. So this is how it would look with the appropriate syllables. 1 triplet. Now it's going to be easier said than done when you actually get to pieces. So just practice it, just clapping or tapping on your desk first, or playing just on one note on the piano like I did, and then try something like maybe Arabesque by Debussy, which I have played in an earlier lesson, but let's continue. We have actually a lot more to cover. Okay, next up is 3 versus 4 polyrhythm, or 4 versus 3. It works the same way. Again, we're using our triplet as our reference point because I always like to think about where the other notes are fitting in compared to that triplet. So if you take a look in this software, they're very nice. They help us line up the notes. It's pretty easy to tell where each one, I always like to draw these like little lines to kind of help me visualize. We can see that the first 2 notes hit together, and then a 16th note, triplet, 16th, triplet, 16th, which sounds pretty complicated, but if you learned anything in this lesson, it's to not overcomplicate things. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, we're going to count out a measure of triplets in 4/4 because that's what we're using as our base. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. Now what I want you to do is we're going to, like last time, add in this 16th note, and I like to say triplet, it just kind of helps me play it. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet. And then once you got that down, I want you to add in this note. We're now adding in a note between the first and second of the triplet and the second of the third. So it's going to sound something like this. And now we have half of the polyrhythm done because we've already played these 3 notes. We have those in between. Now we just have to add in 2 more notes, but we're going to add in one more for now, and it's just this first one. We're going to play these together, and it's going to sound something like this. So now we have almost the entire thing. Hitting them together, we only have one more note to go, and we're going to sneak in one more note after that last triplet. So here's where things can get a little hairy, but so long as you've been building on it each time like we've been practicing, it makes it a bit easier to handle. So here's how it's going to sound. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind that helped me is to really think like what note is happening after that first triplet note. And just remember that it's that 16th note right there, because that trips me up. Sometimes I'll accidentally play the triplet note instead, but keep working on it. It's going to take time. And already just a few minutes practicing, I've actually gotten a lot better at it. I don't see a lot of pieces with this 4/3 polyrhythm, but if you play Chopin or anything like that, or anything more contemporary, you are going to see it. We have some great rhythms still coming up. Let's continue. Real quick with this one, I want to play the last 3 notes coming out of this, because you may be thinking, well, Tim, how do I go from this 4/3 polyrhythm to just playing straight eighth notes, or quarter notes in this case? What I like to do is as I'm playing the quarter notes, I'm still thinking about that triplet pattern. So bum 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 bum. I'm still kind of playing out the polyrhythm in my head as I continue, and that helps me maintain a more steady tempo. There's another thing you can use for steady tempo, and it's behind me. It's right there. That's the metronome. I don't have my, oh, here it is. Hold on. So obviously the metronome helps you keep clicks and beeps. I love this one. It says Long Beach Music on the bottom, and you can get it off Amazon. I'm going to make a lesson on just this someday, but let's continue. Okay, the dreaded 30-second note. I get this question literally all the time. How do I play 30-second notes? I've never talked about it on the channel, I think. And if I did, it was a long time ago. So again, people confuse this, overcomplicate it like all the rhythms. And that's because people want some sort of syllable, and there probably are syllables for these, but I don't like one E and a, one and to account for the different subdivisions. However, with this one, I think about it a little bit different. So when we are playing 16th notes, right? Which is the one we learned before 30-second notes, it's 4 notes in the place of 1 quarter note. Remember, a 1 E and a, 2 E and a, just like that. Now, how I want you to think about this 30-second notes is that it's 8 notes in the place of 1 quarter note, but I don't want you to think about it like that. That's going to be too much, at least for me. Instead of 8 notes in the place of 1 quarter note, I want you to think of it as 4 notes in the place of half of a note, or an eighth note. So this is how I want you to think about it. I'm going to count 1 and play 4 notes for each of these, and you'll see how much easier it is. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, if you did it as quarter notes, 1. See how it's a lot harder for me at least to continue visualizing that many notes in the place. So just split it up into halftime, or split it up into halves really. 4 notes for each half of a beat rather than 4 notes per 1 beat. There's no need to overcomplicate it with syllables or anything like that. And of course, 30-second notes are much better when you're doing like runs and things like that. It's very hard to play that over and over and over again right on the same spot. It almost reminds me of the old video games where you have to tap the A button as fast as you can. Okay, now we're getting into some weird stuff, guys. And that is syncopation. What is syncopation? Well, syncopation is when you are offsetting the beats, right? So we're used to probably a lot in your music as a beginner especially, hitting on beats 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Well, what if it was like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and you're hitting on the off beats and holding some notes over? That is syncopation. We're not going to get way into syncopation today, and if you want me to do a full lesson on it, just let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your feedback on what you want me to cover. But let's take a look at this one. Let's make this as easy as possible. What do you think I'm going to say? Right? What have we been using almost this whole time, particularly back with the 16th notes back here? We are going to use our attack point strategy. Remember, it's not about how long do I hold the note, it's where am I attacking next, because it's very easy to hit a note on a beat or an off beat, especially if you're counting it and you're waiting for it. So let's just chart out this measure. Now, if you were glancing at this real quick, it may be like, whoa, what notes am I hitting on? Well, it's a pretty easy answer, actually. Our attack point, we're going to have a few here. I would say on and, right? 1 and 2, and then and 3, and then and, so lots of ands, 4 and then we're done. So let me count this out real slow and I'll play it for you. So here, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now, one thing I do want to keep in mind is we do have some quarter notes here. And so maybe just make the distinction that we're holding over that one, holding over that one. So once you get your attack points, you probably do want to take a look back, make sure that you're just holding these for long, and then that one only for the and. So it would sound more like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Here's another syncopation, and then I have some really tricky ones here for you at the end that even give me trouble to this day because of all the math involved. But anyway, here you have another syncopated pattern, right? We're hitting on beat 1, and then we have and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now what are we going to use to figure this out? The attack point strategy. Our attack points are right here on and 2 and 3, and then the and of 4 here, and then obviously we're hitting on beat 1 too. Keeping in mind we're holding this over for those 3 syllables there, and then this is a quarter note, and then this is just, you know, actually above your music, if you want to start doing this, is a little trick that I use. I write like little dashes for a short note and a long one, and that just kind of helps me see the note duration in just a different way. And it's helped me a lot throughout the years. If you want to use it, hey, you don't even have to pay me any royalties. It's okay. And if you want to pay me royalties, that's fine. Anyway, let's continue. So I'm going to play this measure out. Remember, our attack points are on and 2 and 3 and 4. And then and, I guess, would be another attack point. So real slow. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Let me see if I can speed that up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Perfect. See, attack point strategy really works. Okay, we're going to finish out the lesson with some really tricky stuff here, mainly double dotted rhythms. But I have a question for you before we continue, and that is, are there any other rhythms we didn't cover today? I tried to really incorporate as many of the ones that I got from the comments of the other video I did on the basic rhythm patterns that beginners mess up all the time, or something like that. So I want to know, are there still any rhythm patterns that you want me to make a follow-up video on? I could make a trickiest rhythm pattern video if you want. Right off the top of my head, I'm thinking maybe something with tuplets, like where you have like 5 notes in the place of 1, or 5 versus 2 or something like that. It's the only thing I can really think of that I haven't covered yet. But if you can think of something, please let me know in the comments. It really helps me make better videos, and I always love to hear back from you, the students. Okay, we have the dreaded double dotted notes. These are my least favorite, mainly because I don't see them a lot and I always forget how to count them whenever they come up. So the main thing you always want to remember is that a dot adds half of the note's value back to itself. But what if you have 2 dots? Okay, so down here we have our half note. That's worth 2, right? And remember, the first dot adds half of the note's value back to itself. So it's 2 plus 1. Now, what does the second dot do? The second dot adds half of the first dot's value back to the thing, and it's easier than it looks. So we have 2 plus 1, and this is half of 1. So it's half of the dot before it. So we have 2 plus 1 is 3, plus a half is 3.5. Now the question is, how do we incorporate that into maybe our attack point strategy, and what do we do? So let's just chart out this whole measure here. So if it's 3.5 beats, we already know it's going to take up the entirety of beats 1, 2, and 3. And it has to take up half of another beat. And we already know, probably from other lessons, that half of a beat is expressed usually as the 8th note, right? So we know that this is going to be holdover for 1, 2, 3, and then the first half of beat 4, that's technically 3.5, and then the second half of beat 4 is going to be here. So it's actually pretty easy. It's just going to be counted like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Very easy. Now we're getting a little more complicated. So how many beats in this dotted quarter note, double dotted quarter note, do we have? Well, let's take a look at our math. So there's beat 1. Dot makes it 1 plus 1/2, right? Adding half of its note value back to itself. And then the second dot is going to add half of a half back to the whole thing. So what is half of 1/2? And that is, of course, 1/4. And of course, we're going to turn this half into 2 out of 4 so that we have common denominators. So the question, what is 1 plus 2 over 4 plus 1 over 4? And it's 1 3/4. This is why I don't like these. There's lots of math involved. So now we have to figure out, it takes up 1 3/4. How do we figure out where to move using our attack point strategy? So we're talking about quarters. So if you're talking about quarters, you're talking about splitting notes up into 4 parts. And we use what? The 16th notes. And that's why I have a 16th note right there, right? So it's taking up an entirety of beat 1 and then 3/4 of another beat. So it's taking up 1 whole beat, like I said, and then 1, 2, 3/4 of another beat, and our attack point is on and then obviously you have 3 and 4 E and So let me count this one out real slow. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and So a lot of times when you have a dotted double quarter, you're probably moving on the last 16th note of the next note. Unless, of course, they use some kind of syncopation. Then you're really going to have to figure it out. But just know that when you're talking about double dotted quarter, you're probably going to expect a 16th. So I got one final tip for you, and it is to watch this video right here. It is the more basic version of this video, the more basic rhythms that piano players mess up all the time. Check that one out. Make sure to check out this one as well. It's about common mistakes that a lot of piano players make, and it's slowing them down. Your piano teacher, Tim here. Thank you so much for coming by. Leave a like, and I'll see you next time.